website. Now we're recording. Very good. So Michelle took on the job of updating our website, which is, if anybody's ever been involved in that, is a monumental task. When you think of it, send her a note, tell her thank you for doing that. So if you don't want to be recorded, don't ask the question, or you can ask the person next to you to ask the question for you. So, with all that out of the way, let's dive into practical ways to grow municipal capacity. The first two major items that we're going to talk about tonight are what are the pros and cons that other towns have experienced when they've expanded the size of their select boards. And I should note that Freedom and Unity held two public events in the fall of 2023. And we had like a big board with lots of issues that got put up. And the concept of expanding the select board was just one of the issues that got a lot of votes. So that's sort of why we picked that as one thing to talk about. The second is what are the pros and cons that towns have experienced from hiring an administrator or an assistant to support their select boards. So to help us think through these questions, we have a dream team of panelists. Seriously, this is an embarrassment of riches, and I'm really, really grateful to everybody making the effort to be here. We did a prep call. It's a great bunch of folks who are really excited. I'm glad they're excited to be here. So starting on my far right, on your far left is Brian Carroll from Glover, the retired school administrator and currently an education consultant. He was a member of the select board for 8 years. And then when the town created a town administrator, he was the transitional first administrator for 6 months in that position. Next to Brian is Linda Martin from Wolcott. She's been on the select board since 2020 and the chair since 2021. She was also town clerk and treasurer from 86 until 2000. And she was in the Vermont State Legislature from 2005 to 2016. And at some point, I know Wolcott expanded their select board from 3 to 5. And in 2018, the then town clerk informed the select board that there was a real need to hire their own assistant. And this town clerk, whoever it was famously quoted in a local newspaper saying that the select board needed to get weaned off of seeing the town clerk as their secretary. Maybe Linda can explain who that town clerk was at the time. Next to Linda is Matt Maxwell from Coventry. Matt was the town administrator from 2022 to 2025, which is a full-time position. And besides town clerk, Coventry also has a town treasurer, town accountant, and a delinquent tax collector. The town administrator is hired by the select board and works directly for the select board. That board currently has 3 people on it. Next to Matt is George Putnam from Cambridge. He retired from the Farm Credit System in 2016, served on the Cambridge Select Board from 2017 to 2023. And during that time, they added a town administrator in 2018, and then the next year, they expanded the select board from 3 to 5. Next to George is Kathleen Ramsey from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. She's a native Vermonter from Middlebury, was raised and currently lives in Addison in the town of Leicester, Vermont, which has a population of about 990, so somewhat similar to us. She earned her BA in political science at UVM and has spent most of her career as a town administrator or a town manager, 4 years in Massachusetts and 32 years in Vermont. She's now with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and she serves as the municipal support specialist, providing tailored one-on-one support to governing bodies and local officials. I expect we may be calling on Kathleen at some point for that tailored support. And I want to extend a special thanks to her for making a really huge effort to drive here. Anybody who knows the state, Leicester is more than 2 hours from here. So thank you for doing that. And finally, next to me is Jim Sullivan from Burke. He had a career in banking, retired in 2021. The next year, he was hired as a town administrator and continues in that position today. He also still chairs their town planning commission, and he has managed 3 weather disasters that required FEMA grant management. And Burke has a 3-member select board. So all of that, we can now finally get to the meat of what we're talking about. So our first question is about expanding their experience. Anybody who's has something to say, we'll just start at the end with Brian and work our way across. So the question is, what benefits did you see from expanding your select board? What were the challenges, the downsides? How did you recruit new members and maintain collaboration? But as the whole question really is about, what were the pressures in town that led you to consider changing your structure? How did you know you'd reached the moment when you needed to do that? What steps or policies help make that a smooth transition and transparent or not? What do we need? What can we learn from your experience? So I'm going to bring this all the way down. Thank you.
We'll just say down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you twist that, it should. Okay.
Okay, a little background first. So I served on the board, the Glover Select Board for just about 9 years. And like most recruited board members, I was reticent and reluctant. I succumbed to community cajoling and a personal sense that maybe I could make a difference. And I have to say, I think that's a wonderful way to tackle the challenge of making a difference, being on a select board, as many of you know. So my first year on the select board, I was definitely a newbie. I had a full-time job, which was not the same situation for my other 2 board members. Fortunately, they were both semi and retired. And so I could sort of ease into being a board member by shadowing them and providing other input and insights. I tend to have an organizational wonkiness to me that goes back years and decades. So I'd like efficiency, the systems, so I was plugging those things, much to the head scratching of my colleagues, but they bared with me. We had a couple significant projects going on. We were building a new town garage, and it was pretty evident that one of our board members, Jack, he made that pretty much his full-time job. He did all the required paperwork, funding, state requirements, the bids, and it was pretty impressive. And I realized, holy crap, if this has to happen a couple of years from now, I'm not going to have that time. And so, but thankfully, he did that. Our other board member, Mike, he was a whiz with figures, and he really sort of managed the budgetary stuff. And so I helped him as much as I could. So the first year was sort of a wait and see. Not a whole lot got done otherwise because of that major town garage. We did have some human resource issues regarding workman's comp that concerned me because we were a little systemically challenged around what do we do if, and our policies weren't really up to date. And this is where we relied on VLCT for some direction. And thankfully, we did what was right, even though it was difficult conversations. So that was going on too. It was when I became chair, which was the 3rd year, that I started to take some initiative with looking at, is this a reasonable expectation for 3 people to do? There was a grumbling of people in the villages saying, you know, they didn't feel represented. There was, some sense that, we weren't necessarily keeping on top of things, which was legitimate because we didn't have anyone. The town clerk, as people know, it's easy to use the town clerk as your administrator. I think it's a very bad idea, and our town clerk, as collaborative as she was, she finally admitted that she shouldn't be doing some of this stuff, and she has her own responsibility. So that started to ramp up this idea about, you know, having a board, have an administrative assistant, not a manager, someone who could represent the board to the community, communicate back and forth. We had the website, we were doing upgrades in the website, and it was nice to have, we wanted to have someone who could be the key person for that, not the town manager. So, I know there's a space here, but I'm gonna jump to COVID and ARPA. One of the, defining, issues was the amount of ARPA money that was available. And what the hell do we do with it? This amount of ARPA money was, I think, 4 times the size of our budget. And so we firmly believed that we wanted to get community input. And things ranged from, you know, pickleball courts to, you know, vast trails along the Black Hills. And so the board did make a decision that we were gonna upgrade the town hall to be able to have Zoom and have a projector and be able to branch out into the community more. I had been concerned that the same old people were coming to board meetings, the same old people were coming, not old people, the same people were coming to town meetings. And there was a lot of people just at home, particularly elderly people, so it was, we really wanted to expand the capacity to do remote. And so so that actually worked pretty well. That was at the point where I agreed to step down from the board to become the prototypical administrator. I did it for 6 months. I did it for about 15 hours a week, but I wanted to at least, I had the job description written, it was approved. And I wanted to, be able to usher in the ARPA funds and have it be a community inclusionary thing. And so as town administrator, I also was more focused on communicating with the state and with VLCT, having an office in the town hall rather than 3 volunteer select board members who work out of their house. It's difficult for any sustained communication, and so we eked out a little office upstairs. And there was also files had been sort of haphazardly spread around file cabinets. The town manager did a fairly good job of filing, but like, again, it wasn't in her bailiwick. It was the board, and she's an elected official, and so are we. So it wasn't like we expect the town manager to be an employee that's gonna support the board. So I should have timed myself. I'm probably going over. So what happened was we recruited a part-time, I'm sorry, back up. Glover was fortunate to have a part-time town clerk assistant. I'm sorry, full-time town clerk assistant. And thankfully to the town clerk and to the discussions that we had, it was evident that she didn't really need to be full-time and that the systems were created by the town clerk. So it was decided that half of that time that position had would also be dedicated to the board. So we recruited someone who would be both town and board administrator. That was a little bumpy. The first person that we were thrilled at that we hired, quit after the fourth day. So in my silly human resource mind, I'm thinking, what a great opportunity, the diversity of helping the town manager and the board. It's like, this is like building a career. Well, apparently that was just not in the cards, even though we thought we explained it. So ultimately, we went through a couple, the process was a little longer than I was hoping. We did find a the board administrative assistant who has picked up the ball and we're very happy to have that chemistry or that system. I think it has resulted in easier to recruit board members when they know, and I've publicized this to anyone I talk to, that there's a person that can get into the weeds. You don't have to do the weeds as much. Your job is to govern as a leader, and that, and those are big decisions. We don't want to distract you. This is why, because, so I think we were able to appoint two fairly young board members who have, one of which has just stepped down for many reasons, but it does give hope that being on the select board isn't just a sentence of drudgery. So.
Nice. Next person who wants to go?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just the first question.
Yeah.
So we'll get expanded to a 5-member board in 2006. I went back through the minutes and I can't find any conversation on, and I can't remember of why we did that, but I have a feeling that probably the citizens were asking for that to happen. We actually, in the next year, someone petitioned to rescind that, but it was turned down. So we've had 5 board members since 2006. Our select board seems to have longevity, I don't see a lot of people coming and going quite often. So we haven't had a problem really with trying to fill those positions. You know that everyone comes with an agenda. I mean, I even came with an agenda. So usually there's a reason why someone is running, for some reason, for their community or things that they think they need to be done.
Coventry is gonna find out. It's gonna be an article at town meeting in March to expand from a 3-person to a 5-person select board. We had a voter back petition early this year. They wanted the select board to have a special town meeting and do it, over the summer. The select board sort of talked them out of that and said, hey, withdraw your petition. We'll put it on the regular town meeting. So it'll be the second article after we elect the moderator. We'll ask if they want to expand to 5 people. If they say yes, they will immediately nominate and elect 2 additional select board people. And it's because of money. Coventry has a lot of money, and a lot of the people there feel like 3 people shouldn't be in charge of $20 million. So that's the reason.
Well, I don't have that kind of problem. As Daniel said, I served on the Cambridge Select Board for 6 years from 2017 to 2023. This should say former Select Board. Early in my time on the Select Board in 2017, the Select Board formed a community engagement team. Maybe a little bit like your Freedom and Unity Committee here. To address issues primarily about town meeting, but also anything in general about town government. There was a list of issues that they were specifically asked to address. And one of them was, should the select board be expanded from 3 to 5? That issue had come up at town meeting once before in 2006. It had been voted down then. The community engagement team, recommended to the select board that it be put on the warning again in the following year, 2018. And did not take a position as to whether or not they thought it should be approved. It was approved by an overwhelming margin, 78% approval. But we set it up so that the town had a year to think about it. The town had a year to think about candidates. If they voted it in 2018, it would be effective 2019. So there was a year for people to think about whether or not they wanted to run or recruit their neighbor or whatever. And we had 4 good candidates run for the 2 new positions. And there was one incumbent up for re-election who ran. So out of those 4 candidates, 2 of them got elected, 2 young people. Of the other 2, one of them got elected a couple of years later when there was another opening. And the 4th one said to himself, "What was I thinking? Don't ever want to be on the select board." So he serves the town in other ways. This community engagement team did a lot of work in 2017. We met many times. I was on the committee myself. It was a 7-person committee. The town clerk was also on the committee. He was a new town clerk. He'd been in his job only 1 year. And they made many recommendations. We surveyed other towns nearby to see what they had done. Found that there'd been a lot of work done by various towns. We did a survey of our town. We all read this wonderful book, which if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. All Those in Favor by Susan Clark, authored by Susan Clark, who's sitting in the back of the room. Susan came to one of our meetings and was very helpful to us. And many of the recommendations that the community engagement team put forth about town meeting were enacted. Now that committee only lasted for a year. That was kind of intentional as well. They worked very hard for that year. And then the select board said, you can continue as an informal work group if you want without a charter from us. But I think they felt burned out and it did not continue. There is now a new committee, but it's dealing just with town meeting issues. So back on the 2 issues that you're considering here tonight, both of those issues were taken up by the community engagement team. You spoke about the expanding select board and how that turned out. They also recommended adding town administrator to town government. And this was a unanimous recommendation of the committee. It had been talked about for a while in town, a decade or more off and on, but nothing had ever been done about it. The new town clerk that I mentioned that was in his job for only a year, he was a strong proponent of the town administrator because he could see that he was doing stuff. He was being asked to do stuff that really weren't in his job description. And there was generally widespread support on the select board and among the townspeople for the time had come to add a town administrator for a town the size of Cambridge. On both sides of us, Johnson and Underhill, smaller towns in Cambridge, had long had a town administrator. We invited them into a select board meeting to talk about their experience. And so in the 2018 town meeting, those 2 issues were both on the warning. First came up expanding select board. There was a lot of discussion, both pro and con. A lot of people felt that things were working well, why change them? Other people wanted to expand the select board for a variety of reasons. In Cambridge, we do everything from the floor at town meeting. Paper ballot was called for, and as I mentioned, that did pass overwhelmingly 78%. The next article was about the town administrator, and there was almost no argument against it, and it passed overwhelmingly in a voice vote. So we started the process of looking for a town administrator in 2018, immediately after town meeting, and we ended up hiring as our first town administrator a young woman by the name of Marguerite Ladd, who now works with Kathleen at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So one of your challenges if you add a town administrator is what do you do when they leave? Because it takes a few months, typically, maybe more, to fill that position, and you've got to have staff, select board members or whatever that can fill in. It was a challenge. We're now on our 3rd town administrator, and they've all been good. There's a couple of differences between Cambridge and Craftsbury, so what worked for us might not work for you. Cambridge has almost 3 times the population of Craftsbury. Our grand list is more than 3 times the grand list in Craftsbury. Our tax rate is 9 cents, our municipal tax rate is 9 cents lower. So you gotta think about what your human resources are to draw on for positions that are created, whether they be elected or appointed or hired. And you've got to think about what your taxpayers will bear. Every town has those issues, and not every town has the funds that cover it.
So, hello, everyone. Just a couple of thoughts on the 5-member versus 3-member, select board that haven't been mentioned is, on a 3-member select board, if you have a lot of turnover, you can see some, wild fluctuations in what the town's policies are. In one of the towns that I worked in, over 3 years, all 3 select board members were, voted off the board. And so what the board that I started working for was headed in one direction with economic development. The new board was headed in another direction. So if you have some long-term priorities that you want to see through, I think there's some stability with a 5-member select board. I think as Brian touched on, as far as the town administrator or assistant to the select board goes, think about the projects that you have and the capacity of your select board to take on those projects. What do you have in mind? And is it fair or doable for your volunteer select board to do those projects?
Good evening, everybody. In Burke, we have a 3-member select board. There has been no discussion about going to a 5. However, we do have residents that bring it up every now and then, especially because of things such as the new town garage. And as was mentioned before, that's a big nut, and a lot of people feel like 3 people having control over that it doesn't give you sort of the diversity to maybe, get that different vote. So it has been tossed around, but at this point in time, the select board feels comfortable with 3, and that's probably where we're going to stay. As far as the town administrator goes, one of the things, and very similarly, we're very lucky that our select board has been the same. We don't have a lot of turnover. Our select board members are proud to serve. They like what they do. They run, they've done good things, and they've made good decisions. So they get reelected. That makes it very easy, for somebody like me, because, as Kathleen said, that turnover sends you in a different direction. One of the things that our select board did have, and they are very, very financially astute on the budget, and also how they can maybe make an investment that could help them. I think when they first started to think about the town administrator position, it was because there were some big projects coming up. We had the town garage, we were putting in a wastewater system. And then this was all coming off of COVID, where, as was mentioned, ARPA money was available. What knew was that they needed somebody who really knew finance and had financial background and understood how to manage all of this. As was mentioned, I'm a retired career banker. I literally started in the supply room in my high school year of senior year of my high school, and worked right up through. And so I'm very good with the numbers. And so that was why they brought the town administrator on, was almost to save them from having to add new select board members. So initially it was our zoning administrator, Mike Harris, who got that job. He got to be both the zoning administrator and the town administrator. And he did do a good job for a while, but it did become overwhelming for him. In the meantime, I was the chair of our planning commission, so I was sort of on the sidelines watching what was going on, enjoying my retirement. And what we were finding is that, it was getting very hard for him, and it was mainly for grants. And again, our select board was very astute on, what's available from the state. And, we have, better roads grants that are available. We have, grants and aid. The V-Trans offers class 3 road structures grants, there's a ton of them. And they really wanted somebody who had grant writing experience and also the ability to administer those grants. The one thing they did when they did their interview was they didn't specifically state that. And they got a bunch of applicants, again, I didn't apply, that didn't have any of that grant writing experience. And so it kind of defeated their purpose. So the second time around, I had made a suggestion that they point that description a little bit more towards what specifically they want, knowing that we had the town garage and that we had, other wastewater projects, other things that we needed to do. Nobody applied for the job. It was just too hard. It was just one of those things where now people were looking at it and they were just like, I don't know if I have the skills to write grants. I don't know if I have the skills to administer grants. So I went home and asked my wife if I could do it. She said, okay. And I spent my 6 months of retirement skiing and then jumped into that. So it is one of those jobs where if you do consider a town administrator, it can be so beneficial because I can show my select board how much they paid me this year and how much I brought into them with grants. And we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what I get paid. So I know that they're happy with my work and I'm not going anywhere. But like, that's where their mind was when they were originally thinking about this. Like, they knew that they wanted a town administrator. They don't make me manage the road crew. I work very closely with the clerk and our treasurer, but they're very good about making sure that they keep me in my lane where I'm getting grants to do paving, I'm getting grants to fix bridges. We've had 3 FEMA disasters. I'm certified in safety, road safety. I'm out there protecting my road crew when we have disasters. And these are the things that town administrators do. So like, it's a big job. I never realized, as a banker, how much, I would learn about engineering. But it is so beneficial. And I guess probably the only thing I can say is if you think that the town administrator is too much, then do start with that select board assistant and start to take some weight off and then see if that can evolve. Because we do have 1,800 people in the town of Burke and we do have a pretty good tax base. So it can be justified. I know some of the towns here don't have that. So that's what I say.
Great, thank you. So some of our panelists have already sort of jumped into the second part on hiring the town administrator. So if there's anybody who still feels like they want to get into that, like Linda, I'm going to give you that chance.
So as Daniel said, I'm the one who went to the select board and said that I could no longer, be their assistant. They relied on me to fill out all the numerous forms, grants, everything. And there also was a group of people in town who also saw the need that it was time for Woken to have an administrator. So we set up a committee of people. We actually hired Duncan Hastings. He was the former Johnson town administrator and came in and we did a lot of comparisons of what the town clerk's duties were and what the select board's duties, side by side. We also did a chart of what we wanted to see the town administrator or select board assistant to do, what the job description would be, because it could be numerous, it could be huge. In our town, we do have our select board assistant overseeing the road crew, whereas in Burke, they don't. So each town would have to set up their own, job description for that person. We've had 3 of them, 2 of them left, because they didn't get along with, I guess, other personnel in the office, let me say. But that's a learning experience. I mean, towns would have to work that out. We have, a good person now. We've changed the titles. It started as the town administrator. The person we hired wanted that title. It sounded better. And then we went to a project manager who was a former select board member, and now we have a select board assistant, which, is just to assist us. And we built in the hours, it's not full-time. Wolcott couldn't afford to pay $60,000-$70,000 plus benefits a year. So right now they just work 30 hours a week, so that it's not such a burden on the taxpayers. And also gives the taxpayers the opportunity to see the wealth of, how helpful it is to have this select board assistant, because they can go into the office and they want to talk to someone about a problem. There's somebody there. There's a dog issue, there's a homeless person, every day there's issues. And when you're either retired, select board member, or you work full-time, you can't deal with all that on a day-to-day. And the town clerk should not be doing all that. They should be doing their work. So I guess that's all I really have to say. Or questions?
Yeah, anybody else who wants to chime in on that?
I just want to clarify, I didn't answer the first question. We didn't consider a 5-board. In Columbia, a 5-member select board, because we realized how difficult it was to recruit 3, basically, so.
The Coventry Town Administrator position was born out of trauma and strife. It's no secret, we had some impropriety, some money went missing, and a lot of money went missing. The select board felt they needed a full-time presence in the building. And they also made some changes to to our internal controls. We had, the same person signing checks as was doing the reconciliations. We've fixed all that. And we're on our 4th town administrator now, and I would be wildly shocked if it ever goes away. It's been really good, I think, for the town.
One thing I would recommend if you're considering a town administrator is to do everything you can to get buy-in from your citizens. A select board could just add that position, just increase the budget and ask the voters to vote on the budget up or down. If you vote from the floor, they can make amendments if they want, but they most often don't. In Cambridge, we chose to take that line item and make it a separate article so that it would get discussed and people would know ahead of time that it was going to be discussed. We put a dollar number right in that article. Here's how much we want to add to the annual budget for town administrator, total salary and benefit costs. And I think having that separate article there, letting people talk about it and get buy-in on it was very helpful. I don't see Cambridge ever going back either.
I think there are a lot of approaches, like has been mentioned, starting small, starting with someone that may assist the town clerk and the select board as an assistant. You could consider sharing with a nearby town of a similar population. That's what I did when I was in Massachusetts, just starting out. I worked for 2 neighboring towns. And that worked out well. There was a lot of synergy there. That's it.
That's another thing that we've been talking about as well, with the MBDA about is trying to help as an administrator that's been through 3 disasters and have budding towns that, you know, like Newark and Sutton, and they got really crushed this year. And, you know, for those of us who have that experience, we're trying to share that, you know, make it clear that we are willing to help other towns if they're in a you know, have a problem, and trying to get that word out. You know, one of the things that I always try and say to everybody is if there's anything that you ever wondered about a disaster FEMA grant, verbiage and how to write a disaster inventory, call me because I'm glad to help. And I've tried to help, you know, any of those towns that were affected this year. East Haven was another one. You know, they don't have an administrator. They have, you know, a few new select board members. They are one select board member who did all their grant work who's gone. So, just keep in mind that it's not just about our town, you know, we are community people and, we'll literally help anybody.
Do any of the board, any of the panelists have a question that came up, they want to ask one of the other panelists? Did something come up and you wanted to dig a little deeper on that? Think about that for a second. I'm going to take the privilege of asking just one follow-up question. It's for Jim, because you talked about, you know, you've raised lots more money than your position costs. And when I heard about that, it was like, oh, well, you know, was that just because it was, you know, ARPA, we had these disasters, and so a lot of money came in. And I wonder about, you know, I know there's a lot of different grants that you could possibly apply for, and that's one of the challenges for small town. But if everybody ends up hiring town administrators and assistants, is there then going to be so much competition for those limited dollars that, you know, it'll be a race to the bottom and that there, you know, we won't be able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars more than, you know, we end up paying our assistant?
That's an excellent question. So this is what I found out about that. Yes, there's definitely, you know, a lot of towns out there, money allocated for those towns. And, you know, V-Trans kind of tells you upfront in the beginning of the year whether it's your turn or not. You know, but like I was talking about these paving grants, you know, these are $300,000 grants. You know, a structure grant to fix the bridge in the Passumpsic River, you know, that's probably going to wind up being, you know, somewhere around $160,000 grant. So at the beginning of the year, they tell you that you're not up for a grant this year because you got one last year. But I apply anyway. What ends up happening is, you know, in order to have these grants, the town has to put up, you know, probably 25% of whatever that project cost is going to be. Well, if you're talking about a $200,000-$300,000 paving project, you know, or something like that, you know, that 25% is a lot. You know, 400,000, that's $100,000 the town's got to come up with, and some of these smaller towns just don't have that money. But they're on the list, they're on the top 10 list, so they don't apply. And I count on that. Honestly, I do. I write for every single grant that is available to me, knowing that most likely it's going to be denied. However, when you get one, we're not talking about a couple $100 here. You know, we're talking about a couple $100,000 that you just got for your town to improve its infrastructure. And your town's only going to kick in 25%. So we've done tremendous infrastructure work, upgrading culverts, fixing bridges. In 2024, we lost a bridge completely. We're almost finished putting that back up. So, you know, that bridge is going to cost us $400,000. Fortunately, that's a FEMA project. So yes, that's true that, you know, the more administrators there are, there's going to be more, but these would be those smaller towns that were in line for that money anyway. And so I kind of feel like there's plenty of room, you know, for more administrators.
Can I just add to that, when you apply for a grant, it's kind of easy to apply for a grant. The hard part is that you have to do all the reporting and the work afterwards. That is what takes all the work.
Yeah, that's
And you
true.
need someone to really follow those grant requirements.
All right, well, I'm gonna open this up to questions from our audience, but first, the first people I'm gonna give an opportunity are the patient people sitting at home. So if there is anyone on Zoom, can you come off camera or put a question in the chat? Wendy, do we have any questions in the chat?
Think so, no.
All right, seeing no questions in the chat for now and no one raising their hand, we'll go to the audience. Catherine Sims.
Thanks. This is so lovely to get a window in each of your town, and it's nice to know that there are some universal challenges that our towns struggle with, and that we're not alone in that. Jim, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what it was like to already be in your position and then have the flood happen. And the sense I got a little bit was like some of the skills and experience and relationships you have were relevant and allowed you to like hit the ground running, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. And then a kind of question for everyone. We've talked a little bit about 3 to 5 on select board and town administrators or assistants to the select board. Should we be thinking of this as an either or question or a both? Like, are they solving different problems and they're both really important? Or if, our community is looking for a little bit more capacity, should we look in one or the other direction?
Depends on what you're looking for.
So I'm sorry, I got caught up in the second part of your question. The first question you had asked.
You were in your position when Bert got slammed with water
Mhm.
and like,
So, yeah, so that was an interesting day. And night. So yeah, I had just started, had about a year and a couple months under my belt of normal life. And then the storm came. It gets crazy really fast. But when a storm comes in like that, you learn real fast what is needed. And the first thing you're doing is meeting with road crew, calling contractors, trying to find anybody possible to get people back out on the roads because you lose, we have 60 miles of road and only 10 of it is paved. So everything is gravel and we all know how bad you get a river running down one side of those roads, all those driveways lose connectivity. So anyways, we have some great contractors in our area who put everything aside to come and get work. Um, the relationships that are built are those with V-Trans, because you now need to have V-Trans coming out to inspect all your bridges and make sure that they haven't been compromised. You need to be working with the Agency of National Resources because every perennial culvert that just got washed out is going to need a permit. And any other river work that needs to be done is going to need to be approved. So in that first storm, I met all of these wonderful people and built rapport with them. So yes, Catherine, absolutely. After that, each storm was so much easier because I knew Ben Matthews at ANR and I knew that I needed him. And I called him on day 1. He was there on day 2. And same thing, with Logan at V-Trans, get his inspectors out. So you figure things out really quick, you know who those people are that you need to call. The first disaster that I handled was complete craziness, and I'm sure, I'm sorry, I can't see your first name, from Coventry.
Matt.
Matt.
Yeah.
He knows too, because he was there as well. You're working on a portal and it's very clunky. It accepts some formats, it doesn't accept others, but you figure it out. So the relationships you make help you, for the next one and for the next one. And I hate that I'm an expert at disasters now. But July 10th has just not been kind to Bert. 3 years in a row on July 10th, even this year. We're still waiting to find out if we're going to get a declaration on that. So anyways, the things you find out that you're doing now is protecting your road crew. As I mentioned, I am certified in traffic safety. That came from the first disaster when I needed my road crew driving 10-wheelers with material, not standing down in the road, holding a slow stop sign. Those of us that were not CDL certified were the ones that had to get some high vis gear on and get down there and do it. And so then we just brought training and we trained everybody in town to be, everybody in the select board and, others to be certified so that if it happened again, we would be ready. And guess what? It happened again. And even Catherine will tell you, she came to find me one day in the clerk's office and I was not there. And that's because she had to come up on the mountain road to find me because I was controlling the traffic. So, yep, your life flips real quick. You're in deep with FEMA. They call you every day. The one thing that's good about an administrator is that you're there to take the call. You're there to get the email. The thing to do is to respond to it immediately. By doing that, you stay in the queue. They keep working with you. They give you something else to do before you know it, you're done. I know that you've heard a lot about towns that haven't received any of their FEMA money yet. We've received every dime, even up to last year. We've received every dime, and it's because of the diligence of handling the grant when the agents are sending emails. And these towns that don't have, they're expecting their road boss to do that. Well, he's out on the road and he's working, and he may not even look at his email today. So down to the bottom of the pile he goes, and they might call him in another couple of days. You really have to stay on top of it. So the administrator part is really, really beneficial when you have a disaster. The only thing I'll say is if you don't, then you need an administrator who's self-motivated. I live in the town that I'm administering, so it's really easy for me to look for grants and try and do things because I know not only am I saving the residents money, I'm saving myself money. So those are just kind of the things I, mention that kind of go along with that whole disaster thing.
Thank you. Anybody else want to pick up on Catherine's question?
First or second?
Either.
Yeah, I'll just briefly touch on the second question. And I think Jim's testimony supports the idea that having someone with capacity and competency in the challenges that face towns is a big deal. If we're comparing expanding a board to 5 versus a dedicated administrator, I would think I could say both options could alleviate some problems. With a 5-member board, it means that puts some of the burden on the chair to be sort of the facilitator of who's doing what. And obviously there are good chairs, but then there's the consistency if chairs change. So I guess I would fall down on the going with a board administrator, I think has a little more benefit.
Do you want to just articulate a little bit about what you think is unique about that benefit?
Having someone who is attentive X amount of hours a day in the same place with the same phone, being able to think about a planning procedure and then communicate that plan versus a board member who maybe is at home and, oh yeah, I gotta go contact so-and-so because we're gonna have to talk to the attorney. Oh yeah, oh, I missed that call. It's just those things, and that's just getting back into the weeds. So.
So having been a town administrator, I think it really helps to keep the pace and the momentum going. So many times you'll have something come at a select board meeting and there needs to be research done, thought about it, do a position paper or whatever. And that's what your town administrator can do. So the whole board can be focused on the policy and projects, whatever comes out of that, and not, be bogged down and take more time, on those things.
We're at questions from the audience. Anybody from, no? Start over here and we'll go next.
Question for Jim.
Can you speak really loudly, please?
Question for Jim. As you're going after grants, should it be assumed that you're building into that administrative costs that then can positively impact the town budget so that your position is in some ways covered by grants as well as by the budget itself? I just wanted to bring that up because I'm not sure that all towns potentially realize that.
You're right. You're right, they don't. So the first year, it was kind of embarrassing. After my first year as the town administrator at town meeting, somebody actually got up and challenged my salary, saying that, what do you get him for? You know, he's not worth that. And I was like, geez, they obviously don't understand what I do. And so at that point, I started to change my administrative report that I would bring to the select board every month. And what I did is I would list all the grants that I've either applied for or that we've been granted. And then what those projects are going to be and when those projects are going to take place. I put the total amount of grant and then what the town, would be having to match. And at the bottom, it's got the grand total of what we have in grant money coming. And then in an asterisk at the bottom, I always list my salary. Because your salary in the public world is public and anyone can see it when they look at the town report, I don't really have any problem with it. Anyone can see it, but it is a reminder to them that, this year I've brought in this much, I've applied for these grants. Some of them we don't know when we got them yet, but they can see that we've applied for them. I'm giving it my best effort all the time. And then they also see me, in the town. They see me on the side of the road with the engineers discussing the scope of the work. I'm in high vis gear all the time. I had to buy a different truck because, driving gravel roads after a disaster, I broke my ridgeline. So, it's just, it is a visible position. I think that the town administrator has to be a leader. They have to appear to be a leader, even in the select board meetings. That's how you keep the doubt. That's where people, I think that first year there were people that challenged it. I think right now, if you would ask anybody in the town, they think they probably should pay me more.
I have a follow-up question to that, because I think we've heard different things at different times about sorry to jump in front of whoever has the next question, but it's the late. So I think we've heard different things at different times about whether administrative time can be charged to a grant. So I think there's sort of maybe two questions, are those grants paying for your administrative time, or are you bringing in so many projects and grant money that benefit your town that the town is happy to pay for that,
Right.
pay for your salary? So it's a little bit.
So it's both.
In the weeds, right?
It's both. So FEMA pays me hourly for my administrative work. So every day, if I have a meeting with FEMA, it's going to take an hour. I list it. At the very beginning, when I was out 12 hours a day for the first 2 weeks after the disaster, I wasn't doing my administrative work. I was doing FEMA work. I was, working on that disaster. So yeah, at the end, you have category Z, And at the end, you put in for all your hours and they pay the town back. I want to say that this year, it's probably gonna be almost 50% of my salary is gonna be paid for back by FEMA. Those other grants are just, they're hard work. It's not like you're just gonna get the money, like you have to write for these, you have to meet with engineers, you have to get a scope, you have to understand, how to, how you're gonna, build a set, A&R is really, the Association of Natural Resources is really good about coming in and tell you, when you have an 18-inch culvert, that they want you to upgrade it to a 72-inch culvert. Now, like, that could blow your mind, but I mean, the knowledge of knowing, the scope where you don't have to now go and get an engineer, because I've done enough of them myself. That's when you start paying back, where you're not going out and hiring somebody because you've got the expertise to do it yourself. I think that's something every administrator just has to build with their select board. Every select board just, they have to, at first they didn't know what I was capable of. After 3 disasters, they learned, that I jump up in a loader and fill material in the 10-wheelers. I really was willing to do almost anything. And I said it 100 times before. I think I said it to Catherine. She came out to see me on the road. There's nothing below the town administrator. And I mean that. I've been on the back of my rubbish truck because the attendant didn't make it to work that day. And there's nothing worse than collecting trash on a July summer day. And yet I've done it. All right. So, I mean, we pay and people see. And if you're good at it, nobody questions it.
Got a question in the back?
Yeah, my question, I think is for Steve. How many towns that are the population wise the same as Craftsbury and Grand List size, same as Craftsbury have town administrators? If we were ever to go there, would we be an outlier because we're pretty small? We're smaller, maybe not Clever. You didn't all say what your population was. For your Grand List, those of you who have a ski area, down to the ski area, it's a matter of scale. So in order to put our situation in context, I'd like to know, maybe you don't have that in your fingertips, maybe Free Community already looked this up. But are there 10 towns, 50 towns that are just like us, that do have administrators?
So there are, what I can tell you is that there are about 251 towns, and there are about 100 towns with town administrators or town
And
managers.
so you can't say whether your town's 2,000, 3,000.
Generally, the threshold for a town manager is about 2,500. The town manager form of government, not necessarily a town administrator. I could look further into that and get back to
There's no rule
you.
of thumb. Bigger our town managers, that's very.
I'll get back to you.
I would be curious, full-time and part-time too, so like, if there are 100 administrators, are certain of them full-time and some of them part-time?
And I think in addition to town administrators, you have some administrative assistants who are essentially performing the role of town administrator.
It might be Kathleen, it might be somebody else, that since you just threw out the town manager phrase and okay, wait, there's town administrator. There's a lot of types of jobs that have been talked about. Is there someone who's capable of kind of giving us the taxonomy and definitions of what these different kinds of supplemental capacity building jobs exist in Vermont's various forms? So, because we basically been talking about well, what, select board administrators? You get the question?
Yeah, so I've seen there's sort of an inherent tension between a role or an employee who has jurisdiction over other employees, and that would be a town manager. And there are many benefits to having a town manager who has oversight over, let's say, the road crew and can help with the evaluations. I can say as a board, we fell down on our road crew evaluations, for many reasons, but having someone as a town manager do that. So you have your town manager that manages, and then anything else that I know of that is an administrator. You know, whether it's a board administrative assistant or a board administrator, they don't carry any of that supervisory responsibility. But they're doing what we've been talking about, providing contact, communication, grant writing, sort of thing. So, and it's an interesting dilemma because I think in small towns, I may be spitballing here, but I think in a lot of small towns, there's a resistance to have anyone have that much control over other people that aren't elected. And
I think but my understanding is a town manager can make a lot of the decisions over the select board. And is that true,
Oh,
Kathleen? And then the assistants work under the select board.
that's right. The town manager must be adopted by the town meeting and has special statutory duties assigned to it. Everything, the day-to-day operations of the town, all personnel management, all buildings, grounds, roads fall under the town manager. Town manager serves at the pleasure of the select board. So it's always best if your town manager is in close contact with the select board on everything. The town administrator, the job description is drawn up by the select board, directly supervised daily, not daily, but the day-to-day operations could be. You could run pretty much like a town manager, but the select board is calling all of the day-to-day shots.
And the town manager makes a lot of money.
In Loyal County, only Stowe has a town manager form of government. Well, they just changed. They just changed.
Yeah.
Morristown is the largest town by population. Stowe is the largest town by grand list. And the other 8 towns do not have a town manager form of government.
Can any of you address how the town clerk's role, duties, jobs has changed when you've added another position like a select board administrator or town administrator? And maybe with specifics, have financial responsibilities changed, have administrative responsibilities changed when that person's been added?
So in our town, it allowed our clerk to focus on what she was really elected to do. Which was to issue dog licenses, to look for deeds, make recordings, do all of the things that the elections, run all of that, focus on that. So I end up picking up a lot of that extra stuff, like with the new public meeting laws, as you can see, we have to have everything recorded. Everything needs to be managed. That's something that I do. Before I came, that was something that she would do. And she didn't like it. She wasn't technically savvy. She found that, working with the computers and things, it just wasn't her thing. And then I ended up taking over the public meeting notices, because again, like a clerk will do it, but it's not necessarily the clerk's job. So the administrator can actually start to lift some of these like administrative things that the clerk has to do because there's no one else to do it. Actually take it on as part of my job and a responsibility under compliance. And what I mean is that, there's so many laws, there's public meeting laws, public disclosure laws. When someone requests something, we only have a certain number of days in order to provide it. someone has to manage that, and that's what I call compliance. That's what I did in the banking world as a bank examiner. So I handle that pretty well, making sure that the notices are up however many days or hours before, that it gets out to all the right places, gets to the newspaper. It's things like that. All of a sudden, a street sign is missing. The clerk gets the call. Well, I'll take care of the ordering of the new sign. I'll ask the road crew to put it up. That's not really something that she has to get involved in. So it's things like that, that you kind of work as a team. And, as I came on, I think at the beginning, they didn't really see my value to them. But right now, they tell you that, they really do like having me around because, even when it comes down to changing the water bottle, our treasurer is 74 years old, she's just to have me around to do that, she's all for it. So, like I said, nothing's below the town administrator.
Hi, I'd be interested to know how you've used the website in your towns, to support your roles, either as, a select board member or as administrator. Anybody can talk about whether that's been an investment you've made and how that's working for you.
I can say, that was one of the impetus for having the town board administrator was to be the contact for our web person. And ARPA, again, gave us opportunity to significantly upgrade our website. We were able to put out surveys, Google surveys. And I don't know if they're still doing it. I haven't got one in a while, but I found it pretty helpful to be able to get direct input from the town. It wasn't huge, and I was hoping it would grow. But I think, like everything else, people just have a hard time attending to a website. And I found myself, I get notices about board meetings and I'll go to the website and download it. That's about all I do as far as minutes. But I think you have to have a pretty vibrant website and a Facebook or a social media link that will point people to the website. So I think that's how.
Do you have a subscription alert system so people can sign up to get alerts on things? Do you have that?
We just haven't, we have email. That's pretty much, I know that we created a database, so we ask people to contribute their email so we can do that.
Okay.
It wasn't an overwhelming amount. I think people are probably a little, everyone's inbox still is probably overly crowded.
So that's what Wolcott did with some of their ARPA money too. I see here, we set up really good Zoom. And we record all our meetings. People can watch that on YouTube. We do have text messaging that we alert people, either for emergencies, remind them about dog licenses, taxes, or special events that are coming up, that we've just started. I'm gonna leave this with Daniel, but I brought today, someone asked, it has the comparison roles and responsibilities of the town clerk and treasurer on the other side. What the town administrator would do if he wants to send those copies out. And I also brought some questions that we put together for when we had public hearings, why a town administrator, so I can pass that on to share.
Coventry posts everything on their website, all the meeting minutes, all the meetings, planning commission, cemetery commission, every other, we have a finance committee, all that stuff goes on there, and we do have a text alert.
You have a text alert.
Yep,
So
you sign.
people can voluntarily.
People can send us their phone number, and then you get, if the roads are closed, if the school's closed, all that stuff.
Cambridge also posts all the agendas and minutes from all of the committees. That's one of the things the town administrator can do is kind of keep track of all the committees and make sure they're doing their agendas and minutes appropriately. We have a sign up system where you can get an email anytime something is posted to that a committee's folder, where you can select all committees. And like many towns, we also put a lot of property records. So you can search tax maps and deeds and all kinds of listers cards, all kinds of property information.
Some towns have even added a link to a tax payment service that provides, it is provided for a fee.
Yes, we also have a pretty robust website and we have all of the same meetings, videos, available. We also have on Facebook the Burke Community Forum. And that's worked very well for us when we're doing, anything in town, whether it's, paving or changing culverts. I jump on there, I notify the town of what roads are closed, whether they're one lane. And it's worked out very well. I also use it like, last week, I had to go pick up 21 tires that someone just discarded on the side of the road. So I took a picture of them in the woods and then I took a picture of them in the back of my trailer. And I put it up on the Burke Community Forum. And by the end of the day, I had 2 names of who dumped all the tires. So I've gotten street signs that way. We found we offer a reward. You can call in and anonymously give up your brother or your best friend. Right.
Have you said other one, there'll be an article to expand this, to expand your collection, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Was that generated by the current select board or by a freedom immunity group like us? Or by-
No, it was a voter back petition. We actually had a voter back petition that came to the select board and wanting the select board to have a special town meeting. This was back in June. And the select board sort of talked them out of it, said, can you withdraw this? We'll put it on the regular town meeting in March, and they agreed to that.
And they agree.
Yeah.
So that's where you are now.
Yeah, so
And you assume that it will be passed and will pass.
I don't assume that it'll be passed, no.
No.
I mean, I think there's a few people that will be against it. So, some pretty heavy hitters in town that'll stand up and say why it's a bad idea. But you never know.
Thank you.
Alan.
I'm wondering if any of your experiences of either growing the size of a select board or adding an administrative support capacity, has that changed the way any of your town committees work with the select board or work with one another? Has it energized the ability of committees in any way to help get the town's work done?
I think educating the town committees on open meeting law has been more consistent. Sometimes people who don't live in government have a hard time understanding that when you're on a town committee, they are government. And I think having the town administrator explain those rules to them helps a little bit. So I think it brings more consistency.
Yeah, it also adds consistency. Like I sit on my planning commission, but I go to the DRB meetings and I go to the conservation commission meetings. Just so I can keep the select board updated on what's going on in those meetings, because they don't go. And it just adds a cohesiveness with my planning commission, to see what the conservation commission is doing. I wish that they would send somebody to our meetings. But I think that as an administrator, not only are you going to those meetings, but you're managing your minutes, because just like you said, that they don't understand that we have to have those minutes within a certain number of days. And one of the, it might be the secretary of they don't know that. So they leave the meeting and, they don't go on vacation, they go on vacation, we have to post those minutes. So I'm that guy, who is sending the email, hey, don't forget, before you leave, you gotta send me this, So it keeps, again, compliance It keeps everything in compliance, because like George said, the open meeting laws, they apply. But yet, someone's gotta kind of clue them in, like, hey, you guys need to be videotaping this. You tell them and they don't do it, and they don't realize that they could get into trouble. So, I think it's beneficial. I think it adds a cohesiveness to all your different boards.
Okay, we got time for one more quick question. I saw Catherine first.
Anything you all learned the hard way in your transitions that you want to alert other towns to not make the same mistakes?
This is too long.
On this particular topic.
So,
No, go ahead. Nothing comes to mind right now.
so one of the things I think we learned with hiring administrative assistant was, the job description. I don't think we were very good at that. It's kind of a learning experience, with that. I think we would have just spent a little more, time and detail on what we really wanted with that. To be clear.
Linda reminded me about, the process of recruiting an administrative board administrator. I think one of the hard lessons was we were trying to go slow, and we thought, well, we'll get someone and they'll get into the job and learn it, which it did sort of happen. But I think having a clearer vision for what is this person, particularly around leadership. I think someone had said an administrator needs to exhibit leadership skills. Doesn't necessarily have to be flamboyant, but not be a pushover. And those are things that I would look for to make sure that they're not going to just be rubber stamping things or be yes people.
I would say to, make all of the big decisions as a town, get everybody together in one room, let everybody have a say. And, I think you get the best results when everybody gets to say their piece.
So a couple of comments for select board members. If you have a town administrator, pay attention to the relationship between the town administrator and town clerk. That relationship needs to work. And I think Linda's laying out the two responsibilities side by side is helpful. And also another piece of advice to select board members, if you're asking questions of either of those two people or anyone else, and you're not getting answers that you understand, that's a red flag.
All right, we are right at 7:30, and we will end on time. We could thank this amazing panel. I think it was an amazing hour. And I know that the panelists have all been, staring at my shirt and really saying, gosh, I wish I could have a Craftsbury Block Party town shirt. So we don't want you to leave empty handed. So we have one for each. Thank you all very much for attending. Oh, and we have tons of food. Please stay, eat. We're here. You can help fold chairs, but you can also help eat. That helps even more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Join them.
I feel